Today we're starting section 2.1, which is solving an equation. This is your basic, these would be your basic steps of solving an equation. In this section, we're only dealing with addition and subtraction. To get started, we have a couple of rules. When solving an equation, you should try to get the variable by itself. You want variable on one side, constant on the other. You also have to remember that what you do to one side, you must do to the other to be fair. My directions say solve the equations, and my first equation is x plus 12 equals 10. I'm trying to get the x by itself, and right now it's being added to 12. So the opposite of add 12 is to subtract 12. So I'm going to subtract 12 on the left, which means I subtract 12 on the right. So a positive 12 and a negative 12 add out, and that gives me x equals 10 minus 12. Those two numbers have different signs, and different signs tell me to subtract and take the sign of the larger. So that would be a negative 2 answer. And so my answer for that problem would be negative 2. My next problem has a decimal. X minus 0.813 equals negative 1.096. I want the x by itself, and right now we have a negative 0.813 on that side. So the opposite of minus 0.813 is plus 0.813. So to move the 0.813, I change its sign. If I add 0.813 to the left, I have to also add 0.813 to the right. What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So a negative 0.813 and a positive 0.813 add out, and I get that x equals negative 1.096 plus 0.813. At this point, I see that I have different signs. So remember, when you have different signs, you subtract. So I have 1.096 and 0.813, and I line up the decimals, and I'm going to keep the decimal lined up in the difference. Remember, the 1 is negative. When I subtract, 6 minus 3 gives me 3, 9 minus 1 gives me 8, and then I can borrow here. 10 minus 8 gives me 2, and that leaves me with a 0 on the front. Since my larger number was negative, that means my answer will be negative. So my final answer is negative 0.283. If you didn't write the 0 and you just wrote negative 0.283, that is also correct. My next problem is x minus 6 equals negative 4. To get the x by itself, I have to move the 6. Right now it's a minus 6. So the opposite of minus 6 is plus 6. So I'm going to add 6 to both sides. A negative 6 and a positive 6 add out, and x would equal 2. The next problem you see on your note sheet is 5x minus 4x equals 18, and I will work that one. I'm just going to work it a little bit later. Then we run into our equations with fractions. My next problem is x plus 3/4 equals negative 1/4. There are two ways to work these fraction problems. One way is to work them exactly like we've worked the prior ones today in section 2.1. But there's another way that we'll work them from section 2.3, where we cancel out the fractions. So keep in mind, by the time your test rolls around or your quiz rolls around, that there'll be two different ways that you can work these. If we continue in the same path that we're going on, remember I'm trying to get the x by itself. So to get the x by itself, I have to move the 3/4. Right now it's a positive 3/4. So to move it, I'm going to say minus 3/4. If I say minus 3/4 on the left, I have to say minus 3/4 on the right. A positive 3/4 and a negative 3/4 cancel, and x would actually equal negative 1/4 minus 3/4. I notice that those two fractions have the same denominator, so I'm going to keep that fourth in the denominator. Simplifying across the top, I get negative 1 minus 3. Those have the same sign, so I'm going to add and keep the sign. I know that negative 4/4 would actually give me a negative 1, and so my answer for that one is negative 1. My next problem says x plus 2/5 equals 2/3. To get the x by itself, I'm going to move the 2/5. So I'm going to say minus 2/5 on the left and minus 2/5 on the right. So when I do that, a positive 2/5 and a negative 2/5 add out, and that leaves me with 2/3 minus 2/5. I need a common denominator, and my common denominator for this problem would be 15. I need to turn both of these denominators into a 15. To turn 3 into a 15, I'll multiply by 5, which means I multiply by 5 on the top. To turn 5 into a 15, I multiply by 3, which means I multiply by 3 on the top. So x equals 10/15 minus 6/15. I know that that gives me a 15th on the bottom. But across the top, it's 10 minus 6, and 10 minus 6 is 4. So my final answer for this one would be 4/15. This concludes the first part of section 2.1. The remaining part will be in a second video.